Good evening. I'm Bonnie Hong.
And I'm Ben Hong.
And this is Norwich Confidential.
So we're back.
We are back.
After an absence of about 3 weeks.
It's now 2016. And you may have noticed that we did not have an intro that usually played all last year because we are in the process of doing a new intro to the program. But you do know that we are Norwich Confidential on every Wednesday from 6 to 7.
And you can see our name over there.
Right, our name
Norwich
is right
Confidential.
here. Right. I do, if I can, I'd like to do a quick shout out because just in case anybody wants to know what I do have on my wrist, it's my favorite Christmas present from my grandson, and it says Grandma. So a big shout out to Xander to thank you very much, sweetheart.
Right, he's 8 years old, and he bought this from his own
with his own
money that he earned delivering newspaper.
He's 8, and his mom has him working. I
Right.
mean, that's a real work ethic we taught our
That's
children.
Right, and of course I also got a ballpoint pen, and the best ballpoint pen I can write on. It's a plastic one, but it says Best Grandpa.
Does it really?
Right.
I didn't see that on it. I know you put it away safely very quickly, and you have it down at your office at the VA. So thank you, Xander. I thought we'd start out by talking about a new movie release.
Well, we went to see a movie this weekend, and we thought that it might be interesting. We didn't really know what it was all about initially because the title of the movie is quite, well...
Deceiving a little?
Deceiving a little. It says 13 hours. Didn't realize that it was based on the book 13 Hours. Yeah. So nobody really even wondered what the inside of that book it was all about and what is written. No, I did not.
Oh, okay. I know you've read a couple of articles about Benghazi.
Right, but yes, this is about Benghazi, and this was written as a quite investigative type, but nothing really more investigative than what the Senate committee investigation leads to, and of course what the cover-ups were. But yes, we went to see the movie, 13 Hours, and well, I'm not sure if we should say anything about it, but...
We won't give you the ending.
Right.
I mean, you know, it's like, it is based on Benghazi.
But
spoiler alert.
Right. It is based on a true story and what really went on during that Benghazi attack. And as you probably know, this event occurred on 9/11/2012. Right. The anniversary of course, the World Trade Center. And this happens in a city in Libya called Benghazi. Now, I think the capital of Libya is Tripoli. And that at this time, this was probably around the middle or towards the end of the so-called Arab Springs, and where most Arab countries at that time were having some kind of convulsion. And it started out from Tunisia, went to Egypt, went to Libya, and now it's in Syria. And probably you might be aware that this was initially thought that all the people from these countries will be taken out from the shackles of being forever be indebted to their dictators. And we thought that we were going to give them democracy, so we supported the so-called Arab Springs. And as it turned out, things did not come out really very well. Of course, Muammar Gaddafi was always been our enemy, and so we were very glad to see that his people were raising arms against him, and of course we were just as eager to
I wonder how much of that, I just wonder how much of that had actually been instigated by other forces.
Well, there are several, of course, something that we really will not know, nor will we ever know, because like they said, when you finish reading this message, this will self-destruct. Yeah,
but having watched that movie.
Well, having watched the movie, it was certainly some kind of an eye-opener on how our State Department works.
We don't know, but this is how it worked under a particular Secretary of State.
How our CIA works, and of course how our defense of the country works. And what really is important is that we are basically sacrificing lives just to keep our so-called nose
Secrets.
out of the political fire.
Or secrets. We were actually just protecting secrets.
Right.
The difference between the movie, 13 Hours, and probably the book, I have not read the book, so I don't know how much of the book actually shows what happened on the other side of those phone calls. But having read the transcripts from the hearing, which I did, I read the transcripts of the soldiers. Actually,
Right.
I read those transcripts after I heard somebody give an endorsement.
Well,
And I think that what I want to do, because I want to ask you specifically a number of questions.
well, before we do that, let me give you a little background on exactly what happened at that time. Like I said, this was towards the end of the so-called Arab Spring. Muammar Gaddafi was basically defeated. He was killed, and his two sons, I think, were also killed. So in the meantime, his well, he has a stockpile of arms, basically huge stockpile of arms. And so when the rebels sacked his place down, there were piles and piles of arms, light arms as well as heavy arms. And what we want to do, our CIA as well as the State Department, is to make sure that those stockpile of arms doesn't go to the wrong hand. So we tried to give it to the wrong hands directly.
Yes, we gave them to those people that became ISIS.
We made sure that the arms that were stockpiled will be given to the supporters of the rebel against Assad. Obviously, we were
In Syria.
right. We were supporting the rebels to take down Assad of Syria. So what we were trying to do is not only to make sure that those arms doesn't go to the wrong hands, but that we can gather all those arms, and which we did. We basically sent our State Department and, of course, our ambassador. But, of course, at that time, we designated an ambassador to come to Libya, and his name is, of course, Christopher Stevens. And he basically meant very well. He was loved by the Libyans, and this was a form towards their own democracy. And of course, not knowingly, known to a lot of people, his other role, of course, is to make sure that he gets to buy all those arms so that we can give it to the rebels against the fight for Assad. Now, at this time, there were a lot of tribes that were of course, against the rebels and so on. But at the same time, there was this movie, or coming to YouTube.
Whoever saw that, Ben? Nobody even saw it.
Which,
Really? I mean, did you ever see it?
no, I did not see it.
Did you even hear about it before this?
This was put up in the movie that basically was considered as insulting to Islam. And so there was a huge reaction against this movie in YouTube, but primarily in Egypt, not very much in Libya. So there was a huge demonstration against this movie. But at the same time, of course, there was this event that happened in Benghazi. Benghazi, of course, is where our consulate was, and this was the day that our ambassador.
The secret CIA
right.
compound.
And there were two places in Benghazi. One is our consulate compound, and the other one was a mile away, which is the CIA compound. The CIA, of course, were there with their employees. There were, I think, 26 employees, and in this entire CIA compound, there were 6 ex-military who were paid by the CIA to provide basically security. And also, but at the compound, the consulate compound, there were only 2 security.
But that wasn't really a consulate compound. That had been a private residence.
That had been a private residence.
That the State Department leased.
That's right.
or was renting from the Libyan who actually owned that compound.
Who had fled the country.
Who fled the country. So we're renting this,
Right.
and it is a non-secured building. It has none of the normal security that an ambassador
Right.
was usually afforded when he is sent to any country, but especially one that is in the middle of actual ground fighting.
Yes.
So, I mean, it was not really one of our compounds. It was far beneath what any ambassador could expect.
So on that day, 9/11/2012, the consulate compound was attacked by jihadists, and it was a well-coordinated attack, very well organized, heavy arms, not just AK-47, but 50 caliber machine guns on trucks, as well as some mortars, RPGs, of course. And this event obviously was well known to the CIA as well as the State Department, because they are watching this whole thing unfold real time. And
By satellite
by
tracking?
satellite tracking. And so the ambassador, of course, sent an SOS to the State Department that he is being under attack and to send reinforcement. And we don't know what the response is because we are not on that other part of the telephone line. But to make the story short is that he did not get any response or any reinforcement. So in the meantime...
But according to the transcripts, according to what the transcripts were at the hearing on this, the congressional hearing, we're told that everyone on the other end of the phone was told to stand down.
That this was a mob scene, that this was a mob against the movie in YouTube, and it was an insult to the Muslim.
So they didn't want to start an
So they did not
international event.
want to start.
But I don't believe that they were actually, the other military people were actually told this is just a mob event, because everyone can clearly see they were being attacked.
The CIA compound, which was a mile away, could see that the consulate compound was going down in flame.
Right.
And those 6 ex-military guards or security could see and hear what is going on. So they immediately want to go to the consulate to defend them.
And to protect the ambassador.
And to protect the ambassador. But the chief or the head of that compound, the CIA head, told them not to do so.
Also told them to
stand down. And twice they tried, and there were just a good scene in that movie about how aggressive this security guard in going, and finally they were allowed to. And by that time, of course, the entire embassy was already, or consulate, was already burned down and so on. But they did not show what happened to the ambassador. Now, his aide was, of course, killed and so on, but not shown in the movie, in this movie, was what happened to Ambassador Stevens.
Are you sure that that's what happened to him?
Yes, because during or immediately after the attack, there was an iPhone movie that showed on YouTube the entire event of how they dragged out the ambassador, and he was literally beaten to death out on the streets of Benghazi. This entire scene unfolded through an iPhone movie, and it was on YouTube. And there were other things that they did to the ambassador that I cannot mention here. But
Not
anyways,
if you want me in one piece.
But anyways, he eventually died on the streets, and some Libyan brought him to the hospital. Now, in the meantime, These security forces that went to the consulate could not find him, of course, because he was already taken out. So they had to retreat and go back to the compound, the CIA compound, and well, they knew that they are going to be next to be attacked.
But they took out the other guard.
Right.
They were able to rescue
A couple of guards.
A couple of guards that were left.
And all this time, they were looking or asking for military reinforcements.
At least a gunship.
And at least a gunship. And of course, there were gunships around the area. There were in Tripoli. There were, I think, in Italy. And I think the military reinforcement in Italy is about a 1 hour flight away. One in Tripoli was about 20 minutes away. But none ever gave them support. Now, people will wonder, well, who could have given that order of not giving them support? And obviously, it has to come from the highest level. And we're talking about the State Department head. We're talking about the top CIA director at that time, and of course, the president, because this whole event was really unfolding in front of them. Right. They can see it, what's going on. So indeed, they reinforced the CIA compound. And when I heard about this Benghazi thing, I thought that, well, this happened about maybe just a couple of hours or so and so on. And there just wasn't time for reinforcement to come in. Well, it wasn't really like that at all, because the 6 ex-military guards went to the CIA compound and literally made a perimeter to defend it. And there were a lot of hours that went by. So it's just like the Alamo. When they were guarding the Alamo, they were saying that, well, we know that they're coming in, and we're going to fortify our position. And this is exactly what they did. And there were several hours that passed by, and then you can see how the organized attack started and how they were really overwhelmed.
And every time they were calling for more
because
help.
There were 26 civilian employees in that CIA compound. So they asked for basically military intervention. It never came. And
then they finally just asked for a flyby.
They finally asked just for a flyby to show a military force, and even that wasn't granted. So somebody was telling them to stand down, and they were all left to just be killed.
Right. You know, it was not until I saw a particular endorsement that occurred just a couple of months ago. I mean, I've heard about Benghazi, but I didn't really understand the implication. And then when you gave an endorsement, we did this in Hartford. There were a number of veterans that wanted to stand with you. Ben ended up with veterans from Korea, from Vietnam, a number from Vietnam, the obviously Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And they all just wanted to stand there with him. Each one had given a very brief statement about the service they performed for this country and the fact that they endorsed this candidate. And then Dr. Hong was introduced as the main speaker. I'd like to show you that right now because this is what got, oh, not yet, sorry. But we will be showing it. They're working on this right now to show this. We're having some technical difficulties here at the studio, so we are kind of working through all of that.
Well, in any ways, to finish with the story, and again, this is, spoiler alert, but yes, the CIA compound, again, was attacked. It was an organized attack, and it is just like the Alamo, when they know that the waves of enemies are coming up, right, and they're ready to stand their ground, and there was no reinforcement coming. Now, there are 4 big buildings in this compound, and there were 6 of them to defend the whole thing. And so they were on the rooftops, and they were basically with their, small arms. They got night vision goggles and so on, and they basically were attacked using RPGs and then heavy mortars. And of course, some got killed. But nobody from our state or our CIA or our military went over to try to reinforce or rescue.
Provide any support at all
of those
for the
CIA
Americans that were
or
abandoned there, basically.
The U.S. civilians that were in the compound, 26 of them.
Yeah.
And so they were just left there to be killed completely.
Yep. And the more that we find out about it, I think that it really, there's nothing more appalling than to think that somebody that you love is serving their country, and we would in any way abandon, not just, Ben's right, not just the military personnel that were there, but the civilian employees of our military and of our CIA, to just disregard American lives when they are doing a job for this country, to me is pretty appalling. It's frightening to think about that. But anyway, it was a very dramatic movie. When we came in to set up for the show today, we found out that the young man who does a great job in our booth, Greg, has already seen that movie. And I think both of us were surprised that a young high school kid would not only have seen the movie, but have been really impressed by, he thought it was a great movie. You know, it was, he comes from a military, or a family that is, has their heart with the military, and he was very happy to see that that story is being shown. But it's more than just a story. I mean, when you realize it is not entertainment, but that's really how we behave with not just, you know, do you have an opinion about this empire building and this regime change kick that we are on?
Obviously, there's a lot of political thing and event going on in the world today, and these powers basically thrived on basically chaos and rebellions and so on, and there is power to be grabbed, there's money to be made, and obviously there are players who wants to be at the top of their so-called power. So there's always something going on, but I would not exchange that for the lives of our own American people. To do so, I think, is really gone beyond
but very often, Ben,
honor, integrity, and morality. I mean, you know, there's such a thing called there's no honor among thieves, but I think there is.
But, you know, I mean, there gets to be a point where when you realize and you recognize, at least as time passes, it becomes very evident that regime change has been a policy in this country. We seem to believe that it's okay if somebody's living under a dictator, like even in Iraq. You go into Iraq because you don't like the dictator. There wasn't an uprising in Iraq. Most of the videos and even the correspondence, I belong to a group that used to connect people to people on the internet, so that if you were going to visit Iraq, you would have actual friends there. I had a number of people that I corresponded with in both Iraq and Iran. And I would see these photographs of the people going to the nightclubs, and the cities looked exactly like any large metropolitan city in the United States. Some, except for maybe the height of all the buildings, you could have taken a section of New York City and believed that, you know, part of Baghdad was a section of New York City. That is what the country looked like before we went in. So what was the end result? We destabilized one country. It's taken them 10 years to kind of get themselves straightened out a bit. In the meantime, we just quickly go okay, so
Yes.
so we're going to go black. No problem.
Yeah, we have
Okay.
technical difficulties,
We do have,
folks.
and so,
So
what's
we have
going
to reboot.
we're going to yeah, they're going to reboot. We're going to go black. We will be back on.
Are we
So
still able to talk audio, though? Or?
I don't think so. So we will be back shortly. I did not ask if you could hear us, but we're going to go black. It'll be okay. We will be back on shortly. Okay? Okay, we are back.
So we're back, and this was the very first time we ever have technical difficulty in this station.
Complete
And
technical
we've been
difficulty.
Here for
Years.
years, and
Yep.
when we had our, I think it's called, was it Ask the Vet
Veteran,
or something?
Vet Talk.
Vet Talk or something like
Something.
that.
We
which was
changed the name
over-
of that a couple of times.
which was we were there for about 10 years, and this one,
Yeah.
of course, for almost about a year now.
Yep.
So this was the very first time that we had a technical difficulty. So I want to thank our
Thank Ellen for getting us
Ellen.
back up. We apparently are not going to be able to do the video, but I do have, I do have a copy of that video that I will put on our Facebook page that will be directly linked to this show, so that I really recommend you read it, because there were other things when Ben did this endorsement.
Well,
Oh, it's working? Oh, maybe we can have it up. Okay. Let's do this.
Korean vet.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ben Huang, and I was a major of the U.S. Army and past member of the Connecticut Army National Guard. I served during Operation Desert Storm in Iraq and Kuwait, and I'm also the past National Surgeon General for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Today, we stand here in support of Bernie Sanders for President of the United States. Bernie Sanders has stood with veterans when we were on the battlefields, and more importantly, when we came home. As soldiers, as veterans, we proudly served our country. We took the oath to defend our Constitution, and we believe in protecting our democracy. The present climate of big corporations dictating our politicians and controlling our government's domestic and foreign policy has to stop. We shall never allow our military to be deployed again on the advice of our politicians, who at the same time are working for big private corporations. We shall never allow the military-industrial complex to influence our government in sustaining a war with no strategy of ending it. We shall never allow our servicemen and women to be deployed without a clear mission. And once deployed, we should use our full force defending them. No one should be left behind. We shall never allow another Benghazi event where we left our soldiers and ambassador to die, and Hillary Clinton watching the firefight unfold in real time and yet did nothing. Not only did she not do anything, she refused to allow our military reinforcement to be deployed and to defend and save our soldiers and ambassador. Then came the worst part of covering her failure, and that is to blame this event on American citizens. We should never allow our servicemen and women to be deployed repeatedly and not give support to their families at home. We shall never leave our soldiers alone once they come back home and wait for them to come to the VA because they are suffering from PTSD. by that time it is too late. Ex-soldiers and veterans are dying by suicide at an alarming rate today. The number of deaths by suicide exceeds the total number of KIAs in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. What's wrong with this picture? Why is this not a priority of our Department of Defense, our VA, our State Department, and the President of the United States? Is it because the answer to this question is that if a person wants to kill himself, there is nothing you can do to prevent it? No, this is not acceptable, and you should not accept it. For something that we don't know much about, it's always the "not my job" answer. We should demand from the VA and the National Institute of Health to make this a priority study, and that we want some answers now. Our president-elected officials, and therefore our government, are heavily influenced by big corporations whose only goal is more profit. That is not what I intended when I signed up or joined the military. Our politicians nowadays, as someone said, should be wearing patches of company logos on their jackets like those NASCAR drivers, so we can see some transparency on who they are representing in Congress. Take, for example, the TTP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership. We do not know much about this, but some people in our government do. This agreement is a blueprint on making big corporations supersedes our laws, our legal system, our environmental concerns, and every aspect of our daily lives. Think about the high cost of medications, the toxic waste in our water system, food that we eat, chemicals that are allowed to be used. There is a major erosion of our democratic ideals, and huge amount of money from big corporations are going into the campaign funds of politicians who are eager to be bought. This money is polluting our so-called representative government, as we are no longer represented by our elected officials. We are losing the battle. I am endorsing Bernie Sanders for the Democratic nomination, and I encourage all veterans to stand with me. Right now, we can fight this revolution with a ballot, not a bullet. We need a political revolution, and Bernie Sanders is proving that he is ready to take on the establishment and fight for we the people. This is very important for those of us with a true sense of duty. As veterans, we will not trade democracy for corporate rule. Thank you.
Really and truly, I was shocked when I watched you do that endorsement. I had no idea really what Benghazi was, and when I found out that had happened, Ben, I don't understand how someone who is Secretary of the State, who could have left Americans like that and not have done absolutely everything to make sure that they had the reinforcements they needed, or to stand and greet the families when those bodies came home and tell them that it was a mob, and not be honest because they want to try to cover up the fact that we're giving arms to other insurgents that are going into, we're supposed to be going into Syria. But, you know, I mean, they became ISIS. And yet, it's like, let's just cover it up. It was a mob. We took care of it. And then to hear her at a congressional hearing actually say, what difference does it make whether it's a mob or it was an attack? We still have 4 Americans dead. It makes a difference. You see that movie, and you know what a difference it makes. You know, I mean, they even were warned prior to that day saying that it's 9/11 and they had heard that something would happen, to leave an ambassador in an unsecure building with 2 guards? I mean, if they could do that, that person does not deserve to be commander-in-chief. Now, I know that these are very strong sentiments, and I know that the candidate that we support will never say this publicly because he does not feel that Bernie Sanders would feel that this is an attack on Hillary. Well, he won't say it, but I am so proud of you for pointing it out to even me. And I thought I knew stuff, but you not only went from that, you hit on every single reason why. I mean, but especially because our democracy is at risk. It's not just at risk through the erosion of our democratic principles by having things like regime change, and I'm sorry I'm going on, but when you hit on things like the TPP and the TISA, those trade agreements completely get rid of our sovereignty, and within years after the TPP is passed and is working, they're going to pass the TISA. If our listeners do not understand what it is, I have played that video over and over and over. And if you can't figure out that the TISA is the service agreement, has nothing to do with products you buy or sell, it has nothing to do with tariffs, it has to do with services. The fact that anything that a government provides that can be privatized must be privatized. So consider that for just a minute. The videos talk about no public schools, no public health. Think about our post office. It's in our Constitution. That would actually go. But even worse than that, think for one moment about having your fire department privatized or having our police department be actually Blackwater. That is privatization. People are afraid of socialism. Oh my God. Think about it for 1 minute. We're not talking about socialism with Bernie Sanders. We're talking about restoring and securing our own republic. Okay, get me off of this, Ben, because it was so heartbreaking. I don't even want to talk about what I saw in that movie.
Well, the ending of the movie is that they were eventually rescued by the Libyan army.
Not by the U.S. That's when I cried the hardest, to know that our soldiers were rescued by the Libyan army.
In any case, the civilian employees came home, and the 4 living ex-CIA and security personnel also came home. They all, of course, retired or resigned from the CIA. They did help, become the so-called consultant making these films, and there were a lot of things that they said were not put into the film based on what they said were first-person
that's the only thing they put in, was
Right.
their first-person remembrance of what
Right.
actually happened to them,
and
not what happened on the other side.
there was never a mention of Hillary Clinton in this movie.
Not one.
There was never a mention of the direct response that the State Department gave to them or the CIA director gave to them or the military gave to them, other than the fact that during the movie they showed the chief of the CIA compound calling
A number
her
of times.
or his superior, and
They called the State Department.
and of course the response to the ambassadors when the ambassador was asking for help, there was really no response to it other than the fact that no help came. So the moral of the story is this, that here we have a U.S. citizen in a CIA compound, and with the compound of which was being attacked. And this did not just unfold in 1 or 2 hours. This unfolded, you know, it may seem like just 13 hours, but actually it's more, because it started from an evening and it carried on to the next day and to the following night. They were left to die, primarily, and they knew that they were going to die.
You know, the one thing that I've heard people, when I have talked about this I mean, just even friends, they've been upset that I would talk about this because they said, don't you think that's giving the Republicans ammunition? That's the wrong way to look at it, because that's not the point.
Right. Well, so they were left to die. Now, why is that? Why were they left to die? And why were all the potential help and reinforcement were told to stand down? Well, because our State Department, didn't want Russia to know that we are buying arms and giving arms to the rebels and supporting the rebels to take down Assad of Syria. And irony of irony is that these rebels eventually became the ISIS. So, but at that time, the State Department was willing to sacrifice American lives just so that this political secret will not be known officially throughout the world. Of course, Russia already know that we were supplying arms to the rebels against Assad. So what else is really there to not know? Now, the issue becomes, what really do we do as an honorable country? Well, we never sacrifice lives, U.S. citizens, for anything. We never do that. We never leave any military soldier at the time of an attack. We always go back. We do not leave anyone behind. And here we are seeing, and I'm not saying that the Secretary of the State, Hillary Clinton, at the time was the only or the sole decision maker, but we do have generals that saw this event unfolding in front of them and yet failed to say, I don't care what you tell me, I'm going to go send reinforcement to save my men. Right. So this whole issue has become like a big denial of rights of U.S. citizen. Now, to make the thing worse is that, like Bonnie said, the State Department started covering this up by saying, well, this was really not a planned jihadist attack. This was not a organized attack, but this was just a mob scene that kind of spilled out because of this movie in the YouTube. And when Hillary Clinton made a statement that says that she is going to arrest, I thought that she was going to arrest the jihadist, but she was going to arrest a U.S. citizen for making that movie.
Really?
And that really is the biggest cover-up. Now, the other thing, too, is that, of course, when the dead soldiers came home, dead personnel came home, and they were met, of course, with the families, and Hillary Clinton was there. This was maybe a couple of days later, and as she was shaking hands to these wives of these dead soldiers, these wives were told that it was a mob scene. And she continued to state that it was just a mob scene. And of course, eventually, she was proven to be wrong, because she did know that it was not a mob scene on hour number 1. because she had a lot of emails. And one of the email that she sent to during, as the attack was unfolding, was an email to her daughter, Chelsea, telling her that this was a planned jihad attack. Now, there were other emails that she had sent since, and of course we don't know that because I think they were either destroyed or not available to be seen. But the FBI, of course, is making such a huge investigation into this, and I think it should be. Now, I don't want to point my finger just on Hillary Clinton, because at that time, David Petraeus is also involved with this, and as you probably know, he was the general in Afghanistan and Iraq.
And the current CIA.
And he was at that time the CIA director. So there was the CIA director that's involved in this decision making. Of course, there are generals in that command that basically all those bases, Italy, in Northern Africa were under his command, and he basically should also be questioned as to why he did not send in reinforcement. So there is a chain of command that goes to the very top, including most likely President Obama. But the important thing is that they are willing to give away American lives in exchange on keeping a secret. They're willing to just not give support to our soldiers in time of a firefight just to save, what, faces or a few extra political,
Right.
issues.
The
So
one-
this is a whole thing, and they continue to use this cover-up of it is a mob scene,
Right.
which is, it really, again, goes to the integrity of the people who made these decisions not to, or telling everyone else to stand by. It goes to the integrity and honor of these people.
Which is why I want to make one point. I don't care whether somebody is a Democrat or Republican. I think that the Republicans that want to make this a political issue, they are as despicable as the ones that decided not to go and save those Americans. They want to make it a political issue. Make it in the voting booth. Make sure that you vote in your primary. Vote for people that will change what's going on in Washington. If you continue to vote for the same people that have the same philosophy, that have the same lack of integrity, that have the same lack of honesty, that think that the almighty dollar is the only thing that's important, that are going to be wearing the jackets showing that ExxonMobil is their sponsor and not you, then you are as much to blame. Because the same thing has happened in not just this administration, but in the past administrations. If we don't stop it now, if we don't take a look at who we are electing, we're never going to change this.
Well, let me give you my take on this, because somewhere along the line, something got lost in the translation. Basically, I'm very dedicated, obviously, to the U.S. military as well as the U.S. Army. It's too bad that this entire event became politicized, not just outside of the country, but especially in this country. So when people started asking questions and asked Hillary Clinton about this, it became a political issue, and now it became the Republicans or somebody against Hillary Clinton. And I feel so sad that it had turned into this kind of circus, because people had died, and the memory of the ambassador had to be preserved. And I think somewhere along the line, he gave up his life. For what?
He believed in what he was
Because he
doing.
believed in what he was doing.
He really believed
And that is
he
soon-
could reach the light.
And that is soon forgotten,
Yeah.
for the simple reason that it is now Hillary Clinton, or Democrat, against the entire Republican Party or somebody in that side. That is the wrong turn that I'm so sorry to hear, because this should have been investigated, and the investigation should be, there should not be any party line. There should not be Republican or Democrat in that committee. They should be U.S.
Right.
an American citizen.
Actually, the one person that I don't listen to Bill O'Reilly. I mean, he is not somebody I listen to. And yet, even within this issue, he has said all along the same thing you just said. This isn't something that should be politicized. The only people that should be involved in this are the people that are investigating it. The FBI is investigating it. Leave it alone, because they are the best at doing their job. If they find something, you'll hear it. If they don't, leave it alone, because that's, thank you, that's what, and I was surprised at that. I did not realize that even Bill O'Reilly can be fair. So.
And so this became so politicized that there's just one word that can describe this, emails. And that becomes immediately a divider of whether you are Democrat or Republican. And lo and behold, people died, and the memory of those people who sacrificed their lives are forgotten.
Right. And I think that people criticized Bernie Sanders during that first debate, when, or the second debate, whichever, I think it was the first one, when they were going to ask Hillary about her emails, and Bernie Sanders said, I'm sick of hearing about your emails. We don't want to hear about the emails. It's the correct people they never listened to the rest of what he said. But he did say, it's being looked into. You leave it alone. I mean, even he would not. That's why I'm saying Bernie Sanders will never point out this, ever.
So my point is this, that if there are hard questions that are being thrown out at Hillary Clinton, don't immediately conclude or accuse that, you're just giving fire and arms to the Republican. Let's look at it this way, that there are questions that need to be answered because somebody's or people's lives were lost, and they deserve better than this of how we are treating them. And somehow the true story has to come out, and that there are some people who may be or who may not be held accountable for this, but the truth has to come out. Otherwise, those people who died, it was just like for nothing.
Well, but we have to wind it up. In spite of the fact it still went by quickly, even though we did have that one glitch. I do want to thank Ellen for getting us back up, and Greg. Greg is in the booth alone tonight.
Right.
Thank goodness Ellen was here to help, because when you have equipment failure, there's rarely anything you can do. But we will be back live again next week. And Ben, thank you very much. Really, thank you for everything. I mean, your speech was incredible, and I appreciate your doing everything that you do. Thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you for your support.
And we will see you next week on Norwich Confidential.